with, even if it's just one assistant, and where it's just like they go, okay, sit in your chair, right? Make sure Bert's in his chair, and then they just click the buttons and
Start
all
talking.
of this, and all the magic happens,
Isn't that nice?
right? But yeah, so we are live, and welcome everyone. This is episode 262. Can you believe that?
No.
Right?
Yep. You started this thing, and we're now to episode 4, and now you're 262. Wow.
262.
Yeah.
So it's good to see you again, my friend.
Great to see you. I saw you had the great pleasure of going to the Inosanto Academy and doing the CLOT camp.
Oh man, let me tell you. So that camp finished on Sunday. Mm-hmm. On Monday, I'm supposed to leave at 12:20. So my training partner, he's staying. So we say, okay, drop me off at the airport, because we're only 10 minutes away from the airport in Marina del Rey, as you know, right? Drop me off, and you'll have enough time to go catch the 10:30 Inosanto class, right?
Right.
I get a notification, your flight's delayed until 1:15. I go, well, that's only an hour. We won't change plans. Second notification, your flight's delayed until 2:25. I'm like, I can go to the Inosanto Academy.
Yes. Right? Thank you for airplane delays.
So I get there, and as I'm walking in, there's a guy inside waving hello to me. It's Damon Caro.
No kidding.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
So he's in the part of the room where I'm going to set up. And he says to me, he goes, oh, Dwight, do you know Rich Citrone?
No kidding.
I go, Rich Citrone, why are you so skinny? Right? Because I'm thinking Rich Citrone, he stunt doubles Ben Affleck for Batman, right?
That's right.
And they're all jacked, you know? That's how that day started.
Well, that's a good start to that day, isn't it?
Isn't that incredible? I mean,
delay.
What I'm talking about.
Oh, no.
Right?
Tragedy. What?
Yeah. You get to hang at the Inosanto Academy. Bert, come on, tell people there's nothing like it.
There is nothing like the Inosanto Academy. There is an energy there. Well, Guru Dan's there. Yeah. And you just walk in, and if you have any feel for, what's on the walls in the first place, and the drums and the training equipment that's around and all this, it's just, something very special. And I started at the original Kali Academy, watched my first class in 1979, and then was accepted to start training the following year in 1980. And that place had this feel, like, what a feel. And it's clear it's Guru Dan, because the subsequent schools in Marina del Rey and moving from this location to that location to the current location, he brings this gravitas in a way, but with that amazing, joyful energy. It's just, if you have a chance, anybody out there, if you have a chance, go to the Inosanto Academy. And if you can, it's one thing, go to seminars, go to Guru Dan seminars if that's your type of martial arts you like to do. But if you can go to the Inosanto Academy and train with Guru Dan at the Inosanto Academy, you're going to feel a whole different thing. It's different than the seminars.
Yeah. And it's funny, when I saw Damon, I don't know if you remember this, but you and I had flown out. We were at the Glencoe location. I'm pretty sure it was, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And you and I and it was probably one of those Tuesdays or Thursdays where we had started out at the IMB.
Right.
Then we went to Harbor College.
That's right.
And now it's 5 p.m. We're back at the Inosanto Academy.
Exactly.
And there's this young kid, and you and I look at each other and we go, he's going to be good. And it was Damon Caro.
And guess what? Man, he got good.
Right? Yeah. We knew how to pick him. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
I think that
here's one of the things I wanted to do. Can you see this picture I just put up?
Sorry, I cannot.
No, it is. Let me see if I can change the display and get it to you. What about now? Can you see it now?
No, it's
No?
probably because I'm on my phone.
Okay. Okay. Well, what it is the photograph of everybody from the Cabrika-Brown class.
Oh, yeah, all in
everybody's
blue.
in the blue uniform. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Where were you guys heading with that class at that time? I mean, what was going on?
So Guru Dan and Simo Pala had been going to Thailand on regular trips to study at the Budai Swan Cabrika-Brown Institute or school. And so Guru Dan, of course, became, got his instructorship. I'm sure Simo Pala did as well. And so he was going to start teaching it. And he started a class. And I can't tell you exactly if it was after the regular classes, but I remember it wasn't open to everybody.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, it's been a couple of years, but yeah, we would go in and there were these rattan. There was a guy that used to make the sticks and training knives for Guru Dan and the academy. And so he took rattan and he sort of filed it down and made basically Cabrika-Brown swords, but out of rattan. And so we'd use those and we'd go down, doing the different drills and all. And so we were working that class. And I can't tell you how long it went, but we put in some work. And that was, I'll tell you something kind of interesting. I remember somebody telling me, this is, 30 years ago or something. They said, I really like colleague because you don't have to sweat. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't think you're doing it right. because we did a lot of sweating in college, but Cabrika-Brown, that was a whole nother level. It was very much like a Muay Thai workout. Yeah. It was that same flavor, but you're working with the sticks, or would be the swords. But that was something. It's so great. We have, I think it was Richard Alanis. Yeah, I think he's the one that brought his camera, and then Victor Gendrano, who's no longer with us, our great friend. He's the one that, I believe he's the one that took the photo. Yeah. But thank goodness we have that photo. At least to me. Other people probably like, photo a bunch of guys in blue. But I'm so happy we have that, because that's literally a snapshot of that time period. And you see the people that are there. And the people there were very dedicated to training. Seafood, he makes a joke about that class. He says that everybody from that class went into Hollywood. Oh, I never heard him say that. That's funny.
Right. So that was one thing I wanted to show. Now you'll remember this because you posted it, I think, yesterday. It's the comparison of the picture of the low side kick against the dagger from the old French Savat book, and then from Bruce Lee's fighting method. Yes. Right. Okay. All right. So
I think the old one was from like a compilation of something in France, and they happen to have an article on Lacan and Savat. But yes.
And in your post, you said the second you saw it, you thought of the fighting method.
Correct. Immediately you saw the pose, you're like, oh, well, there it is. There's the Savat. Some people posted it. It's true. It's like, well, did Savat take it from the Chinese arts? Because it's true. So the saboteurs in the south of France, in Marseille, they had a certain way of fighting, and that was noted, and it was probably because of their trips and their voyages. So maybe some of that came from it. But there's nothing that looks like a Savat kick. When a saboteur does the kick, it's so the chambering, the body. We think of our dear friend Salem, right? he's the epitome of form in Savat, or Daniel Duby and such. But I mean, it's very, very distinctive, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean,
For
you're
sure.
expert in Savat, so then you know you are.
Yeah. But you know what's funny is yesterday one of my students who's just returned. He's been back with us for about 3 months. He has the 1983. You weren't at CMAA in '83, were you?
I did not go. I was in college, and in the summers I didn't have the money to go. I was
Right.
on my
Okay. But you might have seen the demo that I did with the Parisian wrestler. Do you know about that?
No, I don't think so.
No? Yeah. Okay. Well, I won't bore you with the story. I do want to know though, what's the feedback that you got on this post?
Yeah, interesting. Some people messaged me privately, but basically it was, oh yeah, you can see the Savat, or hey, you know, maybe that's actually Chinese, or the Savat took it from the Chinese art. And guess what? We weren't there. It may be true. So if we're honest about it, which to me, as you know, honesty is the primary. If we don't start with honesty in our martial arts, then we're going to go into bias and go into all these directions, whereas we just start defending a position when we shouldn't. We should really be honest, especially Jeet Kune. It's all about honesty. It's about having no bias toward other arts and seeing what actually helps us fight better. I mean, it's such a simple thing, which is exactly what you see in MMA, although MMA is a sport and it's not street self-defense, but people fight in MMA. And when I train someone, you know, training somebody for the UFC, you don't care where something came from if it makes you better, right? Which sounds like Bruce Lee and Return of the Dragon, which says, doesn't matter where it came from, it makes you, you know, if it helps you in a fight, you should use it, right? Well, there you go. That's the philosophy right there that we should use. So it's always interesting to me that, not talking just about the post, but the idea of defending your system. For example, I found a lot of people in JKD. Okay, if you're a JKD person out there, you love JKD, I'm going to say 2 words and see what your gut response is. Krav Maga. A lot of JKD people detest Krav Maga. Like, they stole from JKD. They're not technical. They're this and that and all that. I'm here to tell you that there are some elements that are highly, highly useful. And it's true, a lot of the Krav Maga, as it developed away from the original Krav Maga and Krav Maga concepts. Should we get that started, Dwight?
Yeah. Let's do that.
But seriously, briefly, the origins of Krav Maga were, how do we take someone and only in a couple weeks, a few hours a day of training, how do we make them have a fighting chance? If they lose their rifle, they lose their pistol, they lose their knife, they don't have anything to pick up and hit with unless it's a rock or something. How do we make them, give them at least a fighting chance? And, you know, for a beginner, that is a great thing to do to get somebody up, you know, to be able to have some sort of defense, and it's a lot of its mindset. So a lot of really good things in Krav Maga. But if you want to go farther and be much more technical and a wider repertoire and be able to handle more things in a more tactical way, then JKD and the idea of studying ever. So I was talking about bias. You know, Bruce Lee talked about bias. And
okay, let me interject for a second.
Please.
I want you to talk about bias towards JKD as well.
Yes. Correct. That's that I think is the number one issue for me, is if we're doing JKD, we should not have any bias toward JKD as far as, hey, I'm doing JKD. If it's not JKD, then it's no good. Because what I found is, this is my observation in training with certain different styles. It starts like this. Okay, I do my style. let's say JKD, do JKD, you know, and all styles are good. All styles are good, but I do JKD. Then a little later, as people keep training, it's, well, you know, all styles are good, but actually we're just better. You know, we're better, you know, and we're the best, actually. We're the best, right? Then it gets to, you know, we're the best, and those styles are no good at all. You shouldn't even look at them. They have nothing to offer. Yeah. And that's how the mentality goes, but that's all due to bias. Because you know what takes away bias, if you're honest about it, if you actually do it, is sparring with people from different styles. If you go spar with them and the wrestler just goes boom and dumps you, and you're like, okay, I wasn't ready, let's try it again, boom, dumps you again, okay, now boom, dumps you again, you have to say, you should be saying, especially as a JKD person who shouldn't be biased toward what you're doing now, you just have this mind of, I'm constantly trying to look for a way to make myself better able to defend myself and my students. You go, hey, wow, I have got to learn what that person just did to me. And regardless of, so I think having that bias, and it's really easy to do. Hey, look, Bruce Lee started JKD. He was a genius. He was. But what did he do? You know, I was just thinking about this the other day. Actually, I should have printed it out. But Bruce Lee's letter to Wang Shenliang, where so Wang Shenliang, for those who don't know him, he was the guy that probably taught Bruce Lee most of his Wing Chun. So at the Yip Man school, he was an instructor already. And so Bruce Lee, of course, learned from Yip Man. But Wang Shenliang did a lot of the training of Bruce Lee. So Bruce Lee wrote a letter, and okay, see, Richard Torres, what year was that? If he happens to be watching, Richard knows everything. He's just got it down. But Bruce Lee says in this letter that he says, since 1966, he said, when he started using sparring, you know, using protective gear, basically sparring, using the gloves and the helmets. And he said he'll have people come over a couple times a week, Taekwondo, I think he said wrestlers and this and that, whoever, karate people, as long as they don't get angry, you know, when the sparring happens, as long as they have a good attitude. So Bruce Lee, in that one letter, I think tells us, because basically he's encapsulating, hey, Master Leong, this is what I've been up to since 66, and this is why I call the gist of what I do Jeet Kune Do. I mean, for us that are interested in Jeet Kune Do, he actually just summed it up in a few words exactly what he did. He trained with different styles. He put on the equipment and he did sparring. He found out that a lot of his, it says in the translation, most people say prejudices, but you could say the biases. He said, I had a lot of prejudices, but I found out they were wrong. And we can substitute the word bias. I had a lot of biases and I found out they were wrong. So through sparring with various stylists, he found out what wasn't working for him. He found out what was working for him, and he found out what was working for the other people. And that's that discovery process through actually getting in the water is what JKD is all about. And that's exactly and that's why he named it. He changed the name after he went through this process to Jeet Kune Do. So if we look at the difference between Jun Fan Kung Fu and Jeet Kune Do, there it is. He says it right there in that letter. So if you haven't read that, just look it up and study it piece by piece, because basically the development from Jun Fan to Jeet Kune Do is all outlined right there.
So that brings up a question I was going to ask you later. How do you differentiate between Jun Fan and JKD? Because I look at it as just a natural overnight progression. You know, I don't see it as what you did in Jun Fan was completely different, because if it was a particular day in 1967 that he started referring to his art as Jeet Kune Do, the day before, when it wasn't referred to as Jeet Kune Do, were they doing anything drastically different? So I don't see a cutoff point between this and this. What do you say?
I say there was a day, a second, and it just turned, no.
Completely.
Totally, no.
Yeah.
So, yes, in my point of view, because I went through the same thing myself, actually, which is kind of interesting, is, you know, I was studying lots and lots of different things. And then when I started sparring with world-class athletes, when it was called NHB, you know, no holds barred, before it was called MMA, I started sparring. I mean, first it was, you know, Dog Brothers. It wasn't called Dog Brothers when I started. It wasn't like there's this Dog Brother group and I went there and said, I want to try this out. It was just, I got asked to fight Eric Noss one night at the academy after hours, and I did, and I just kept doing that for a long time. So, and it turned out to be later Dog Brothers. So that experience, and then subsequent experiences, I went through that and like, oh, wait a second, this thing is not working so well, and that thing's not working so well, and oh, this really works and such. So I kind of went through that process. So I think I have a good feel for what Sigung Bruce Lee went through. But I would say as it went on, I think really the cutoff thing was the training method changed. I think that's what made the difference. Once the training method, now technique wise, it was little by little. For example, again, talking about bias or things, you know, it's hard to get rid of things that we really like and things that have helped us and things we hold in high esteem. Like, man, I really like this drill and I have gotten so much good out of it, I believe, and this and that. So as we all know, there was a certain point that Bruce Lee, I think, made a phone call, possibly wrote a letter too, that said, Chi Sao is out. Okay. So basically what he's saying is Jeet Kune, as this has evolved, Chi Sao is out. And I would say for those people go, well, what, he didn't get any use out of it? It's no good? I say, I'm sure there is, I am positive that there is definitely benefits from Chi Sao. There's no doubt there's benefit from Chi Sao. The question is, how much training time do you have? In the limited training time you have, are you going to prioritize that? For example, you know who's great at Chi Sao? Do you know Brian Crenshaw? You remember Brian Crenshaw? Mm-hmm. Brian Crenshaw is an amazing Wing Chun practitioner, JKD practitioner, Thai boxer, Dutch Thai boxing, you know, kickboxing. No, I mean, he's amazing. He's really, really good. And he trains a lot of fighters. And we were discussing things. And I said, how much time do you spend doing Chi Sao with your guys, the guys who are going to go in the ring and fight? And he said, none. And it's like, because of the time. If they had 12 hours a day for 4 years, maybe he would add that in to get some extra things. So the point being, back to where Junfan JKD or Junfan Gung Fu becomes Junfan JKD, is I think it was when the training methods changed and Bruce Lee realized, oh, okay, now I have a way to actually discern, instead of, you know, this thing in JKD that I think is a problem with the way people interpret it, is this thing like, hey, you know, if you do JKD, you can look at any other art and see if it's good or not. I dispute that. You have to go in and feel the art, especially in sparring, right?
Yeah.
Like again, if we go back to Savat, if you're used to, say, Thai boxing, and you see this guy moving around and kicking and very, you know, these flippy kicks, and all, you're like, oh, that's no good, because you know from Thai boxing it's no good until the guy puts the toe of his shoe halfway into your body through the solar plexus. Then you're like, oh, this is really good. Or you block like this and his toe comes around and taps you in the temple. Like, oh, okay, no, this is actually really, really good. So the point being, we can't look. And I think through the sparring, you have a much better idea. So I think in Junfan Gung Fu, there was more, let's look at these things. Okay, I think that thing fits into the way I'm thinking, and this makes sense, and let's practice this. Okay, this makes sense. And then we went boom to the scientific method of it. Let's test it in a sparring environment when the other person's fighting back. And now let's see how that works there. So then you now have a different mode of discerning between techniques that are functional, and I shouldn't just say functional, but high percentage. Because it's one thing, you know, almost anything can work. But the question is it reliable and repeatable? Right. Can you rely on this technique to do it often in a lot of situations? Is it repeatable? Can you do it over and over again? Can your students do it as well? So we want reliable and repeatable things. And then you have, for example, let me go to Kali for a second, Illustrissimo Kali. So I had the great fortune of being able to train with Tatang Antonio Ilustrisimo in the Philippines in 1994 for 3 weeks, and then for about 10 days in 96. And one of his moves is, and you'll see it a lot, he takes a stick. Imagine angle one's coming here, and he takes a stick and he brings his stick back, and he uses the back of the stick to knock the stick up and over your head. Now you look at that technique. If somebody's actually whipping a stick over you, or he was a sword fighter, I mean, he actually fought with swords for real. And he actually did prize fights with swords with no armor. That's his confidence level and skill level. You go, well, you know, if someone's whipping that angle one at you, boom, like this, they're really trying to get you. Why, instead of blocking, just going boom, doing a simple block or evade or try to evade and hit the hand, why would you put your sword or stick down, let it come in, and then try to somehow time it to hit it up and over your head? I mean, that seems kind of ridiculous. But that is like an emergency technique. I hit at the opponent. I missed and overswung. He's now hitting toward my head. Guess what? I have one option.
Yeah.
The only option I have right here now is to bring this hand up and here, because I don't have time to do a roof block. I don't have time to move back and hit the hand. That thing is coming. This is my only shot. So he would practice that. He would practice that so that in those situations, he would have it. So I'm just saying, we don't just get rid of everything. But JKD is known for the simplicity and having those reliable and repeatable techniques at hand primarily. So as far as the technical portion, over time, that changed as well as all that discernment process continued. So, for example, culminating in Chi Sao is out. But notice, almost every JKD person teaches Chi Sao still. Why is that? Is it cultural? Is it a historical thing? I mean, Bruce Lee said Chi Sao is out. To me, and I have nothing against Chi Sao, it's just, again, it's not if we're talking about someone coming in and actually trying to hit you, you know, you can develop sensitivity that can be related to other things. Yeah. But Bruce Lee found, you know, it's just not where you want to spend a lot of your time unless you have extra time. That's my point of view on it.
Right. Yeah. Well, you started where you spend a lot of time. If we go back to earlier in our conversation, when you were talking about getting a beginner to a level of functionality as quickly as possible, right? And you have pretty much analyzed a lot of, or if all of what you have learned in order to be able to do that. Because if I remember correctly, that's extremely important to you, like from class number 1. Am I right? You want students after class number 1 to feel somewhat accomplished.
Yes, and in a functional sense, not
right.
a false confidence, but something I want them to, 1, feel like, oh, I already have some tools, right. And 2, man, I do not have the tools I thought I might have. I'm going to talk about women's self-defense for just a second, if you don't mind. Sarah, my wife, Sarah, who is, you know, she's a JKD Unlimited instructor for a long time, which means she went through all the sparring tests and I mean, she's a fighter. She is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. What's that?
In more ways than one, she's a fighter.
Yeah, if you've read her, any of the things she's written on her blog, I mean, it's amazing she even survived all this stuff and she is here today. I mean, talk about what a fighter. I mean, the adversity she's come through and is thriving, you know, it's amazing. And so martial arts wise, she has a very strong passion for women's self-defense. And so what do you want at the end of a women's self-defense? You know, if it's 1 class or if it's 4 classes, you know, these sort of things, you know, you'll see people interviewed after somebody has taught these classes and they're like, oh man, I feel so empowered. I feel so much better about myself and all this stuff. I feel basically empowered. Sarah's point of view is at the end of the thing, they should not feel empowered in a way of like, oh, I can go into any, dark alley, into the parking structure by myself, no problem, because I know how to fight. She wants them to finish the course and go, wow. Avoidance and awareness are the two most important things. It's not just something you talk about. It really is the most important thing, because she gives the girls or women experience, and they get to feel that, oh, wow, this is not easy. They're not magic techniques. There's a man bigger and stronger trying to put me on the ground and keep me on the ground. This is tough. So going back to that, she gives them very basic, strong tools that they can employ right away in the worst case scenario that at least gives them a chance. And that's what I want too, is when people leave that first class, they have a much better idea, and they're not going to be trained in a way that like, oh yeah, man, somebody comes up to me, I'm just going to sliding finger jab in the eye when they throw that jab and they're done. That's not how it actually works.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also you kind of want them to feel empowered to want to continue.
Yes.
I think that's important too. But can you touch for a second on what was the process though that you went through to get to that point? Like with everything that you had studied and learned, what did you have to include, exclude, or whatever to come up with the training methodology whereby after class number one, because I mean, everybody's taught what? Class number one, footwork. Right. But you must have done something different. So you must have had a different thought process. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Okay. I think I had a conversation with Gurdan one day at the academy a couple years ago, or not a couple, because it was before COVID, and we're talking about things, and he just mentioned something that he goes, since I was an athlete, he was an athlete. He said, we look at things a little different. Some people think in martial arts that everything works all the time, and we know in athletics that it doesn't work. I mean, the other person's trying to strike you out. If you're a baseball player, if you're a hitter, you're going to try to take that ball and run for a touchdown. There's a whole team trying to tackle you. So we understand that things don't always work. So I think my athletic background, that was kind of grounded me in a way of like, hey. And then myself going into doing all the sparring, and not just sparring, like hard fighting, dog brother stick fighting, fighting hard in MMA. Well, again, it wasn't quite called MMA yet, with Egan Inoue, his brother Ensign Inoue, over here. Like, if you know MMA, Ensign is just a legend. And I mean, there's a lot of hard sparring going on. And then jiu-jitsu wise, the same thing. I mean, some we maybe weren't as smart. It's interesting. Egan, you roll with Egan. Egan can roll, with a 6-year-old, and he's not going to hurt them. He'll do all his technique and all, and he will not hurt them. And he'll do that same thing with anybody, and he will just work his technique. But of course, there are a bunch of other people, big, strong, in their 20s athletes, and it's just all out. Wah! So basically, I got beaten up a lot going into these new things, and that's just the truth of it. And that's how I got better, and that's how, like, say jiu-jitsu, that's how everybody gets better, is by somebody goes and they just pass your guard, and they mount you, and they armbar you, or they go to your back and choke you, and all these different things. And if you continue over time, you will start being able to do that, and you'll have your defenses better. So that whole process of just going into that sporting aspect, and I was going to fight MMA myself, and I hurt my knee, and I didn't have health insurance, so I couldn't get it fixed. So because I didn't have enough money to pay for a knee surgery. So I dealt with it with a brace for maybe 3 or 4 years. And by the time I was finally able to get it fixed, actually it popped back in on its own. That's a whole nother story. Just one day, boom, actually at a demonstration in Italy, the guy, I'm going, I'm doing the demonstration. The guy steps forward, and my left foot from all the Silat training just said, sweep his leg. And that was the one that was it was damaged. I couldn't extend my leg all the way, and I couldn't pull it back all the way. I had maybe, I don't know, maybe 90 degrees or 100 degrees of motion there. I didn't have the full all the way back and stuff. So anyway, and my leg just went out and swept this large guy, and there was this huge crack, pop, blam. And I thought for sure I had just torn the ligaments, like totally torn them. And after that demonstration was over, and I went back to the hotel, and I go, okay, here we go. And I went and see how far I could extend my leg, and went all the way up, and it went all the way back. So I didn't have to have surgery. But anyway, the point being, by that time, now I'm almost 40, and the MMA competition window had closed. But I continued doing all the sparring and such. But the point being, back to your question, is what do you teach a basketball player first? If you are someone that wants to play basketball, what do you teach them first? You know, do you say, okay, are we going to just do footwork and say, okay, this is how you shuffle to the right, shuffle to the left, fake right, go left, fake left, go right, you know, drive to the hoop. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to put a ball in their hand and let them shoot around a little bit?
Right.
You know, most of the time you're going to let them shoot around a little bit, have a little fun with it, feel what the game's about, and then see how they move, and then start adding things to their natural motion, so that you don't go, okay, everybody's going to play basketball exactly like this. No, you have to feel how you move, how that particular individual. So the same thing in martial arts. What I do is the very first day of class, when somebody comes in and they're doing the JKD Unlimited class, which starts, the kickboxing is mainly Junfan JKD based, is we play the open hand game. And this is within, you know, I show them how to shadow box a little bit. I show them how to keep their hands up and this, and then they're playing the open hand game, which is sparring. And what it is, they keep, usually at first, it's only the lead hand. And so they're trying to touch the top of the head. So they're not smacking anybody in the face. They're not poking in the eye. They're touching the top of the head. Because if I can be touched on the top of my head, if we made a fist, that would be a punch that goes through the target, which means that's the correct distance. So we're trying to get them at this correct distance. And I just say, just play, just try to touch them and don't let them touch you. And guess what? They move their feet and they're moving their head not very well. They're throwing this, and then pretty soon the other hand starts coming up and they're blocking and coming back. So they get a feel, what is the game first? Now, after they have a good feeling for that and for a little bit, then the footwork makes sense. If you just have somebody moving around, you're like, okay, I'm moving. There's no relationship to another human being. The point of footwork is to relate to the opponent, feel what they're bringing to you, and use the footwork to get into a position where you can hit them and it's difficult for them to hit you.
Right.
So that's not going to make sense until we've already tried to touch each other or hit each other, to me. You know, you can explain it, but then it's like, oh, I get it now, years later. So instead, we just play the game right away. So they have a reference point. It's like, oh, this is the world we're working in. Yeah. We're going to work in this world. Just like on the ground, because a lot of people do jiu-jitsu now. On the ground, if you just do techniques on the ground without any rolling, your technique's not going to be so good, because you don't have somebody actually pulling out of it. You aren't going to have the feel of what you're actually after. So when you go and play the game and you do light rolling and feel somebody, especially somebody better than you, going and getting to positions on you, it's, you know, the environment you're working in, and then everything makes sense, because it's like, oh, I'm going to do that in that environment.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it.
As you're saying, I'm thinking about a whole bunch of other questions that we're not going to have time for, because I know you got to go, and we got like 20 minutes left. Your brand is for the street. That's how I identify the JKD Limited brand. Is there an underlying connecting factor throughout all those programs? You got BJJ for the street, CLAT for the street. knife defense for the street, right? You're working. Has it been released yet? The functional trapping.
Functional hand trapping is going to be released probably next week.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Probably
okay. So let's answer this question. If is there an underlying connecting factor that permeates all those things, and then tell us about functional trapping.
It is. They are all sparring based. That's the line that goes through everything. Battlefield Collie, CLAT for the street, BJJ for the street, all of it. You're working against a resisting opponent as the base. It's not something that's done every once in a while. That the point of learning the techniques is to be able to apply it when you're playing with a partner and they're resisting you. So that's the for the street thing is, and of course we don't limit ourselves also to sport techniques. So all of it has finger jabs and hitting the groin. The hand trapping, we don't talk about weaponry, but all the other, there's weaponry involved, meaning we're assuming the other person has a weapon, because that changes everything. Can I talk about that just real quick? I'm going to talk about jiu-jitsu again. There's this great jiu-jitsu champion named Leandro Lo. Some of you out there are familiar with him. I mean, just amazing. And he's huge. I've gotten to see him when I'm coaching at World Championships, and he's just gigantic and super nice guy. Didn't know him, but super nice guy. Anyway, nightclub about a year ago in Rio, I believe it was, Brazil. And some guy comes over and grabs a bottle off of Leandro Lo's table. Leandro Lo confronts him, takes him down, mounts him, humiliates him, and then gets up and walks away. The guy stands up, goes over to Leandro Lo, takes out a gun, shoots him in the face, and kills him. Okay, horrible. So why, to me, is it so important? Now, this is one of the best guys in the world. I mean, just amazing. I mean, legendary champion. Why? I mean, I'm sorry to talk about it, him and all. I really feel for him, all his friends, his family, terrible. But I think we should use it as an example instead of just letting this go to waste. If he trained in not just mine, but in a real for the street mentality, he trained in a way that he's really doing what? Expecting the weapon all the time. Yeah. You always expect the weapon to be there. And the reason you expect it is because it actually comes out in training. It's not just a mental thing. Oh yeah, I expect the weapon. No, in training, it comes out. So you're programmed to expect the weapon. So in that situation that he was in, what probably would he have done? The pistol disarm? No. He wouldn't have engaged the guy in the first place, because I can pretty much guarantee if one of you is in that same situation, some guy grabs something off your table and is, whatever he's doing, he grabs off your table, and you say, I'm going to go teach this guy a lesson. And I say, hey, you know what? I can see he's got a pistol in his waistband. Are you still going to go over and confront him? No. You're going to go get the authorities. If we really, really are expecting a weapon, we will avoid most conflicts unless it's just pushed upon us and we can't do anything else.
Right. Yeah.
So I just want to bring that. So that for the street, the weapons goes through all of it, and it's sparring based, and everybody has to log rounds of sparring. It's like for level 1, you log, say, Battlefield Collie. That's the first one I tried, was Battlefield Collie. It's also an MMA for the street. But I said, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to put out this program, Battlefield Collie, and I'm going to see if I can actually get people to be good fighters, not just technicians, good fighters doing distance learning. So what do you do in class to do that? You teach the technique, you have them hit things to generate power, and you have them do the sparring so they can actually practice applying the technique against someone who's fighting back. And so that's what I did with the program. There's fighting proficiency, which is the sparring. And I say, okay, you watch the whole video, you learn the techniques, you practice techniques, you do rounds of power generation, but you do rounds of hand-only sparring, only hitting at the hand, which I learned for Guru Dan, that whole hand-only, hand in head, hand in leg, full, that's right from Grudan. And they just focus on hitting the hand only for so many rounds, and then they send in a video test. So my thought was, if I'm getting video tests after, you know, a while and nobody is getting good at fighting, I was just going to pull the program. That was going to be it. So it was an experiment. But man, by the time people were getting about the 3rd level, they were sparring pretty well. They get to 4th level and they're sparring very well. They become instructors. I mean, they're really good at sparring because they're spending a lot of time sparring with a technical point of view, and they're doing the power generation. So that's the thing that's through all of those For the Street programs. It's like, hey, how about we research our own experience, like get experience sparring, you know? What if we research that own experience, and then after that, maybe we could absorb what we found was useful to ourselves, and then, you know, find what didn't really work for us, and we can reject that or put it to the side a little bit. And then, hey, how about we just add whatever is our own sort of flavor to it? And that's the whole idea behind the whole thing. But number one, you got to research your own experience. That's why I don't like that. Oh, I'm looking at that art over there. Nah, I don't think that has anything to offer me. Oh, look how they're kicking. They're not kicking the way we do, etc. Yeah. So that's what runs through all of them.
Yeah. Well, that attitude and approach is that's one, ego based, and also it's actually fear of truth and honesty, because
good point.
You discover a lot when you put it on the line.
Good point. You know? And part of it, that's why I don't feel bad about saying, man, I started doing all the MMA and the jiu-jitsu, and I was getting beat up every single day. You know, not broken nose and all that, but as far as I was not doing well in the sparring, and that's just the process, and there's nothing wrong with that. But to do that, that's where you have to put the ego aside. And, you know, when I was doing this, I was already, you know, I'd been on magazine covers, so I was kind of known, etc. But
done a couple movies.
Yeah, you know, doing all this stuff. And, you know, it's very tempting to go, hey, I've got this reputation. Is this going to hurt me? If somebody sees that I'm not infallible, are they going to say, oh, I'm not going to train with him because that other guy over there is infallible, obviously, because he's touching people and they're just falling down. But, you know, we got to just put that aside and do our best. But I think what happens in the end, well, I know what happens in the end, if you really do it and you humble yourself to do the training and the sparring with good people, try to find people better than you. That's really good. And then you train with people who are you're better than, so you help them along. You get confidence, really true confidence, because you know what you can do, but you also retain the humility because you know anybody can get knocked out. Anybody can get choked out. I don't care who it is. It can happen to anybody.
Yeah. Talking about that, you had put out the video. I have it here, I think. It's the one about the kid that used BJJ to defend his friend. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now I wanted to talk to you about that because it's almost a similar situation, but now what's his name? Daniel Penny, I think.
Yeah, Daniel Penny in New York.
He's in jail now, with second-degree manslaughter or what have you. So, what's I mean, what are people supposed to do with that?
Man, don't live in New York.
Well, you know, yeah. Well, a lot of them have learned that, and they've moved to Florida. So
correct. I know you're inundated, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's such, as a country, as a group of individuals. I mean, is self-defense allowed or not? And if it is allowed, how much leeway do you have in making a mistake? And at what point do you take in to account what that other person was doing? The guy that he choked out, and unfortunately, whether he held it too long or whatever happened, the guy passed away. The guy had been arrested 40 times.
Yeah.
He punched, I believe it was a 67-year-old woman on the subway at another time and broke her orbital. You know, this is a violent, violent individual with mental problems, extremely violent, and he is out. Yet, I think Daniel Penny got out on bail, but still, they arrest him, and now he's going to go and face charges when the criminal who is attacking innocent people, he's out. You know, so actually, I'm shooting my monthly video today for JKD Unlimited. Every month I shoot a monthly video updating, trying to get the latest information and updates and showing techniques, and we work on certain techniques throughout the year in scenario, kickboxing, clinch, ground, training methods, etc. And one thing we talk about sometimes the legal aspect. And so we're working this whole year, working on the crucifix choke on the ground, where you trap both arms, and so you have one arm, you trap one arm with your leg, the opponent's arm with your leg. So this arm is trapped, they can't do anything. You trap the other arm with your hand, and you have one arm free to choke, which Barrett Yoshida is just the master of all masters, who I luckily trained with and got to coach in Abu Dhabi's. But this was something I'm going to talk about is, you know, you have to know where you are and what the situation is. Maybe instead of, if you have the control of the person, you switch to a crucifix and you just hold them there, right? Especially in a, you know, a lot of times, as soon as I say something about the ground and self-defense, the first thing is, oh, who wants to be on the ground? You don't want to be on the ground in a street fight. Well, that's right. If it's a dangerous to grapple situation, you don't want to be on the ground. That guy, Daniel, he was on the ground with this guy, choking the guy, and there were all kinds of people around. So they're so thankful that he stepped in before one of them got hurt. So instead of doing the choke, you can get to basically whatever the position is. You get to a position, could be mount position. You get to a position where you can control the person and just control them till the authorities come and take over. So instead of actually putting them out, because once you let go, they're going to wake up and you still have to hold them. You just get to a holding position and you make sure that you're not in danger of being kicked in the head and all that sort of thing. So, man, what a terrible thing. I mean, we have to, the problem to me is personally, and remember, for people like, oh, is he this liberal? Is he conservative? What is he? I'm a very pro-gun rights person who's a vegetarian and is concerned about the environment. So,
spoken like a true JKD man. You're unclassifiable.
There you go.
Yeah.
So my question is, I mean, a lot of people, they want the government to be the only ones that have the right to use force in a self-defense situation. Only the government or government representatives, which we know the government representatives, like the police, as bad as they want to do their job as quickly as possible, they're not going to get there while this thing is going on. They're going to get there in the aftermath. So, we really have to think about this now, instead of just choking someone out. Also, one real quick, you know, using a knife for self-defense, that is something that we have to realize, that if I'm in a situation where I'd be justified in shooting somebody with a gun because the threat was so formidable that was my only recourse, that's the same sort of test, I would say. And there's more to it, right? There are all these legal steps you have to go through. We won't go into now. But same thing with knife, using a knife for self-defense, especially against an unarmed person. You have to show that there was so much threat and they had so much advantage over you that you had to resort to a knife to do it. So a lot of times you'll see people doing, and a lot of different systems do this, and the person has the knife and say they disarm or whatever, or the person comes out of an empty hand. So now it's a knife against the person, empty hand. And they go and they do all these things. They control the person, they take them down, they put them in an arm lock, and then they start stabbing them. You're going to prison. If you are in control of the person, you have control over the opponent or the attacker, and then you use a weapon to injure or kill them, you are going to prison. You have to be very, very clear that using a weapon in self-defense has to mean there's an imminent threat and all those steps. But not that you have them controlled and now you're going to do it. That's an execution. So I just want people to think about this. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's really important for those of us who are interested in functional martial arts.
Yeah. All right. So let's start to wrap this up. But two things. First thing, you got to promise to come back because,
Great.
like I said, there's a ton of questions that were generated up here. And I'm sure afterwards, when I go through the comments, there's going to be questions from people as well. That's the first thing. Second thing, end with this. Why martial arts in general and why JKD specifically?
Okay, for me, when I was 9 years old, just to make it brief, I was basically abducted. I was coerced into going with a person into a place where he retained me against my will, and he was an adult predator, and it was horrible, horrible, horrible thing I went through. Besides all the things that happened, he was threatening to kill me the whole time. And I don't know, maybe it was an hour. I don't know, but basically it comes to my mind almost every single day now. I was 9 years old, so gosh, 20 years later, still comes to mind. Dwight did the math really quickly.
Yeah. That's like,
all right.
That's like last week at camp, Inosanto will go around asking the different age groups, right?
Oh.
he gets to me and I'm like, you forget, I was skinny and tall, but I started with you 40 years ago when I was 10.
Good one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So for all these years later, that basically it's going to sound strange, but I can find a way to be thankful for that horrible thing I went through because it has put my life in this direction. I love my life. I love what I'm able to do and help people. So yeah, martial arts, that's why. And that's why I'm so obsessed with making sure it really works.
Right.
Because I was helpless. I was totally just helpless. Nothing I could have possibly done. And then why JKD? I was first introduced to JKD, went to Enter the Dragon when I was in high school, was taken to Enter the Dragon when I was high school, and had just saw this. But again, that martial arts thing, and how blessed, fortunate was I to be living about 1.5 miles from the original Kali Academy. So I went there. But JKD, it's right in line with all the athletics that I did way back when. So that was part of it. But then reading all the philosophy, Jeet Kune, and then later, more recently, Bruce Lee's commentaries. It's an athletic event that you can do when you're not very athletic anymore. You keep changing it as you get older. But it's just a philosophy of being open mind, not being biased. That really appeals to me because I was a scientist. You shouldn't have any bias as a scientist. You should just go in, do the experiment, see what it says, and go, oh, that's what it says. Let's go with that. Let's change the experiment, try this, and that's how you do it. Bias science, we deal with that all the time, is a problem. So that's really what it is. Martial arts, because of that horrible incident, I don't want anybody to have to endure something like that. And secondly, JKD, because the philosophy just goes across everything. Right. Last thing I'll say is on that, whether it's Silat, Kali, BJJ, MMA, whatever it is, everything is through a JKD mindset, thanks to Bruce Lee, Guru Dan, Sifu Larry Hartzell, Sifu Richard Bastillo, all of my instructors, Sifu Tim Tackett, Sifu Chris Kent, all these people have helped me so much. It's that mindset. And you can take that right into everyday life and use it to overcome obstacles in sparring and in everyday life.
All right. I have a project for you, a new book.
All right.
The takeoff from Sifu Inosanto's book, The Art and Philosophy, a new book by Burton Richardson, The Art, Philosophy, and Science.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I like that. I've been thinking about doing a book on Jeet Kune, Jeet Kune, and then, going along. Oh, that's a very good. Thank you, Dwight. Well, good idea.
Okay. On that note, I think we're right at an hour, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. I do have an appointment. I'm going to mention the trapping program. Guess what? Sparring-based. Sparring-based. It's trapping you can do in sparring. I was one of those guys that said trapping didn't work many years ago because I started doing the sparring with the MMA guys and all this at a very high level, and I couldn't come close to doing trapping and all. Over the years, I realized I was doing it wrong. Right. So, and you can see the way to do trapping and sparring. You can look at 1967, Bruce Lee in the international tournament when he's sparring with Guru Dan and Shibutaki Kimura. And you can see him applying it in real time, and that's how you do the sparring. So we go over Pak Sao, 2 types of Lap Saos, the Jut Sao, the Fuk Sao, et cetera, et cetera. But it is coming out, and if you're interested in functional trapping, which you can teach the MMA people, you can teach the kickboxers, it's for self-defense, of course, because it's functional. I'm really happy with this program. It took me such a long time to develop it. I mean, over a decade. Well over a decade, and I put my whole heart into it, like usual. It's like 5.5 hours worth of stuff, plus all this sparring footage that I break down to show how it actually looks in sparring. So anyway, that should be out next week.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, listen, my friend, thank you very much for spending some time with us. It's great to see you. Great to see you in much better health and what have you. I know for a while there it was you're a fighter too. You and Sarah. My gosh. Gosh.
We just keep going forward. Just keep moving forward, and I'm happy to say I'm feeling good. I just trained this morning, and I mean early here. I'm very, 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 very grateful. So
nice. All right. Thanks again, man. Best regards.
Dwight, you're amazing. For all these years, since the day I met you, you were amazing. And I'm so thankful for you, for your friendship.
I appreciate that. All right. So you'll come back and we'll talk some more.
I look forward to it.
All right,
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
All right. One of the coolest guys in the JKD world. So that was episode 262. You guys know where to find Burt Richardson, jkdunlimited.com, and on Facebook, Burton Richardson. So that's not it for today. We're going to be back in an hour and a half, in about 90 minutes, and Mick Tully and I are going to be on. So I'm not going to do a big closing for this episode. You guys come back right here once again at 6 p.m., hang out with me and Mick Tully. All right. So until then, this is Dwight Woods, JKD Rebel, signing off. Talk soon.